Hej og velkommen til den her tredje session af ENTRE DEBAT Live. Today we're going to have the session in English because we have a guest with us here today, Georg Russegger from Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. And my other guest today is Navndrup. She's head of dance and participation at the National School of Scenic Arts here in Holmen in Copenhagen, where we are today. And today we're going to be talking about knowledge transfer, relationship and partnerships. And it's part of this focus we have this fall in the ENTRE program, which is a program that runs all across the art schools here in Denmark, where we focus on how we can sort of develop or look at the relationship we have with the world around us as artists. Dancers, filmmakers, musicians, fine artists, and so on. So today the focus is on knowledge transfer, and that's a relatively... You can hear me? I'm using this one?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to say it all again, but welcome. So today we're going to talk about knowledge transfer, and that's a relatively new concept in Denmark. It's not really something that we like vidensoverførsel, that would be the Danish translation of it. It's not really a concept that we've been working with as such, but that's something that is developed as a working method and as a concept in Austria, where you're from, Georg, and also in Germany and Switzerland and so on. And the reason why I have invited you two here today, so I just say it again in case the mic didn't work before. So this is Georg Russegger, and he's from the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, and Navndrup, who's head of dance and participation at the National School of Scenic Arts. And I'm Pernille Skov, and I'm head of CAKI, Center for Applied Artistic Innovation, and we are a center who works for all the further arts educations in Denmark. Okay. So you two, the concept, the setup for today is that first Georg, because he's a guest, is going to give a short presentation about knowledge transfer in your neck of the woods. And then afterwards, Laura is going to do the same, talk about a little bit about your practice as a choreographer and as a teacher, as a dancer as well. And then we're just going to have a 5-minute break and then go into conversation where we're going to further explore the concept of what knowledge transfer is for us and what it could be, and just have some interesting conversations, I hope. And if you are joining us from home or your office or wherever you are, you can write comments or questions in the comment section on YouTube, and we'll get your questions here, and I make sure to ask them for the conversation bit. And I think that was it for now. I hope I didn't forget anything. So without further ado, welcome to you two. I'm so happy to have you here today. I've really been looking forward to this. And I'm just going to put your presentation on, Georg. So let me see. We have that here. Oh Lord, I can't see anything. There we go. Come
all
on,
right,
sweetheart.
So let's see, mic is working? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me, Pernille. Also, Christopher, I'm really happy to be here again, especially because of traveling is not so easy at the moment for the Austrians, and so I think I haven't visited Copenhagen for more than a year. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of PowerPoint slides, so I just put something is on the screen as well for the streaming. So my name is Georg, and basically I'm a trained media anthropologist and a media artist. So I'm coming from the field of art, but somehow I have departed. Don't ask me how that happened, but I did so. And from my life experience, I think knowledge transfer, I didn't have the term for that. I had to invent for a framework which we basically have in Austria now since 6 years. And the framework is basically showing it's a network of all Austrian universities, not only art universities. And basically it was somehow a wish of the ministry. They had the feeling that universities are working like silos. So everybody is like in his rooms, and every discipline is in his kind of building, and society is also not very much aware of what universities are doing, what researchers are having, what outcomes are there. How can that be connected in a way to bring a greater good to society? Hidden message to economy, because politicians think economy is very important to connect, because without the money, nothing is going on. So this was the idea of the ministry. But then they had the feeling somehow these social sciences and humanities and the arts have never showed up in this context. There have been technologies, inventions, city planning, going to the moon, all these kind of things. But in a way, art has never been touched, because everybody had the feeling this is such a freedom, such a free space, we should not touch that. It changed with the idea of the Knowledge Transfer Center, and it changed with the concept I was writing, because I thought, no, art should touch something outside of the field of art, and the freedom of art should be a safe space, but there should be some possibility to trans-disciplinary exchange. There should be some possibility to develop projects which are maybe using artistic practices, using artistic knowledge for other disciplines, for other persons, and not just to kind of beautifying stuff, because most of the people believe, and then the artists and the creatives come and they're just making a nice website and they do a good design for that. And I was not thinking that that's the best way how to do it, because it's in a way not the perfect leveling, I would say. So so we decided to make a special focus on the SSHA. This is this acronym what I'm using quite often, because it's actually combining social sciences, humanities, and the arts, and it's not just the arts. So in the beginning, we had no idea how we can kind of bring this on, because at the professors we have been talking to, the rectorates we have been talking, they said, yeah, it's nice that you have funding money and you can do stuff, but what actually do you want to do? What's that kind of idea of knowledge transfer? And everybody had the idea that there is some package of knowledge which you bring from A to B, and that's it. So I don't want to disappoint you guys. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not putting messages or information or knowledge from A to B. So we started to see it as an experimental space, where we can set up formats, where we can set up training methods, where we can set up experimental spaces where people can meet, people can learn, can teach, can peer learn. So basically the whole idea was, we believe that every person we have been working with is actually a knowledge transfer agent, we called them. So there is a kind of agency, and it's a kind of secret hidden agenda, so we kind of gamified the whole thing, that this is a kind of in the beginning like a secret thing we are working on, nobody knows exactly about it, like this old ideas of secret labs where we are doing something which maybe this can impact society in a few years, but we have to be very careful with that, because if this gets into the wrong hands, you know. So this kind of idea of agency, I think it gamified the whole thing a bit. So, and then for sure we had to develop some stuff which is understandable. This is the not so interesting part about it, because you have to do the money thing, and you have to organize, you have to explain to people, and stakeholders and so on and so forth. So we tried to make some catchy phrases and some kind of again silos where we can say, okay, this maybe fits there, this maybe fits there. And the 6 things I want to point out after 7 years of doing that is this is the ones who actually got through the thing, so got understood and have enough peers and people supporting the ideas that we can go on. Because we, as an experimental space, we understand ourselves, we try something out, if it works, we go on, if it doesn't work, we just leave it. So it was in a way a tryout, a try and error thing as well. Knowledge transfer in the digital age was one of the pillars, or is one of the pillars. Intellectual property right, IPR, and everything about Creative Commons and who owns things was one of them. Challenge impact was or is very much based on the SDGs, the Societal Development Goals, and as well to societal challenges. So how can also the artist be a change maker in the field of sustainability, saving the earth, or whatever you want to call it. Then post-grad life. So post-grad means, what is my life after university? What is the vision of what I'm doing? What kind of job profile do I have? Because not everybody is getting a professor, not everybody is a super art market artist or whatever. And then we have open arts, which is the thing where I'm working on the most at the moment, because this is really the thing, opening up the arts from this kind of classical understanding and connect it to other disciplines such as life sciences or such as, I don't know, we are working a lot with children, elderly people, and the artistic practice is really used in a way to reach target groups. So because they're not, I don't know, they maybe are not so good in reading, or maybe they cannot understand if somebody is kind of explaining something in a very high language. So we are using arts really as a hands-on transformer to get information closer to people. And yeah, last but not least, we are working on alternative funding sources, which I point out here is crowdfunding. So we try to also give artists and creatives the chance to create crowdfunding campaigns. And the hidden agenda, and it's quite like that, is if you do a crowdfunding campaign, you basically have to understand marketing rules because you have a product and you have a target group. You have to think about what is my giveaway. But it's a very playful way of doing this kind of business training, because if you go to business university or business school, it seems very boring what marketing is. And basically it's not, if you kind of see it not from this kind of, I want to be a marketing agent, I want to be famous and rich. If you just use it to kind of understand yourself and your products or your doings as a product, then it's actually quite okay, I would say. It's a debate club here, so I'm just bringing out some debate actions as well. How is the time?
I have no idea. I guess it's fine.
Oh, it says 8 minutes. I can be super relaxed now.
Slow down.
Okay, I mean, maybe some examples I wanted to point out. So, as I said, when we started, the most important thing is how can we kind of provide vocational training for people who are actually already out of university. So our main first focus was alumni. Not people at the university, not working with students, because students, they already have a plan what they should learn and what they should do. And we don't want to interfere. And this was also for us a kind of good decision, because then nobody can come into your field and say, hey, don't tell my students how to do business, because we don't like business. We don't like neoliberal stuff. And we think, no problem, because we actually also don't like neoliberal stuff, but we put it in another box and then it's not so neoliberal anymore. Okay, so let's see if that is turning out to the truth. It's after 7 years, I cannot give 100% proof of that, because actually we are living in a very capitalistic world, and money has a very strong role in all that kind of things, because without the money, we wouldn't have been able to do stuff like that as well. So it's a kind of a double bind what we're doing here. I'm quite frank, yeah. So training programs, we call it hubs. We did a lot of hubs. Hubs is like a platform, a space, and a program which is kind of structured, where people can apply for. It has a specific topic. So, for example, the crowdfunding hub, the specific topic is crowdfunding. Or we had as well a program which we are calling Make Yourself an Expert, which is, again, because there are so many experts everywhere, right? Everybody somehow means or believes he or she is an expert. And if you look at the TV all the time, some experts explaining how things are going on. So we thought, why don't we think about how to make an expert out of yourself, out of your knowledge? And what does it mean for that? And for sure, one of the most important things is how you appear. Because if somebody kind of say, I'm an expert in physics, or I'm an expert in mathematics, or I'm an expert in politics, we always have a very stereotyped vision of an expert who is kind of representing that field. And if you're an expert in the arts, you for sure have to have a crazy glasses or something like that. So, we all are very kind of biased by all these ideas how people should be. And then normally, if you say I'm an artist, are you a painter or are you a sculptor? So, no, I'm a freaky hacker. Oh, what? What is a freaky hacker? This is not art. So, in a way, first of all, in this kind of training programs, we tried to also find our systematical biases, which we are carrying with ourselves, and what we believe we will do in 10 years and how we will work or how we will live. And this showed a lot that this is not only about vocational training, about a topic. It also transports a lot of different questions which are never really addressed in an educational system. And by this means, we found out, okay, we have to dig deeper into this understanding of how to make a living. And the next format then we decided to call How to Make a Living in the Arts. So and we didn't address actually what the persons have been doing in the arts. We have addressed how they live within that system. Do they have a good social security system? Do they know about taxes? Do they know about how to write the bill? And no, nobody knows. It's really, and it's not just in the arts. People have really big problems to write bills or to know what the tax level is in their country and how much money they will earn if they kind of say, I'm getting 50 euro per hour, because then half of it you can already give to the tax. And it was really, really surprising, and also for us in the teaching segment, that there was actually a total lack of, today you will call it entrepreneurial skill, and I just call it life skill, because if you don't have the knowledge about that. So again, within that program, we found out that the topic was just the carrier for a lot of things. We can teach, we can exchange, we can train by using a specific carrier which is interesting, because how to make a living is an interesting thing to think about, I guess, not only for the arts. It's actually, so slowly, also our leaders and university representatives found out that's not a bad thing, but how can we embed that into the universities? So we started to kind of embed it since 2 years, because we said, okay, let's try to figure out the things who worked out fine. Let's try to still keep it as an informal entity, not kind of restricted under the rules of a specific institution, of a specific player or stakeholder. So keep it in a way free, but try to give things away and embed it in specific universities or schools. And yeah, this is what we are doing since 2 years, what works actually quite fine, because it's also interesting if you, how to make a living in the arts, we kind of presented it in Salzburg for the music conservatory. And for sure, at the music conservatory, Mozarteum, they have totally different understanding of how to make a living, because of mainly musicians, dancers, time-based media artists, and there is no fine arts. So from the Academy of Fine Arts perspective, for sure we have 80%, 90% of classical fine artists and 10% of doing something really different. Yeah, I'm good. I think I will round up in a way, because I think I'm really interested in debating with you and also hearing what you are thinking about knowledge transfer. And this is the Knowledge Transfer Center with the tag Knowledge Transfer. It's just a tag, because knowledge transfer can be so much things, and it's a free space to experiment, to try things out, and to really kind of get things going in these challenging times, I would say, because next to us, we are sitting here in this beautiful landscape, and I have a 7-year-old daughter, and I want that she has also this beautiful landscape, and not that I have to tell her, sorry, I was doing knowledge transfer during the times the earth was cracking down. I'm really sorry. Would not be my plan. So, and the pressure is coming up, I think, in the last 2 years, sustainability-driven, SDG-driven, and societal challenge-driven focuses are really into my mind, and it's now a personal development that I cannot avoid thinking about that, because I think if we do knowledge transfer and don't take this into account, somehow we are missing totally out. Okay, I think should be the last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's super interesting. There's so much to talk about. Thank you. So, Laura, I'm just gonna... Jakob, is this mic working? Is this okay? Good. Perfect. So I'm just gonna put your images on. Do you want to stay there and I just flip through? Or
we can do that. You flip through.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good.
They're just images for
exactly.
atmosphere.
Exactly. So we had atmosphere with atmosphere on. Yeah. It's lovely. So, and... Here we go. And I just go...
Yeah, when you feel like it.
I just...
When you feel it's a good moment.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So hello, I'm Laura, and I normally sit at the Department for Dance and Choreography at the Danish National School of Performing Arts. I'm so pleased to be here. When Pernille asked me, can you talk here and can we do something about knowledge transfer? I was like, oh my God, I have no idea what you mean by knowledge transfer. But now I know more, and I see that it was a smart choice. It's a much better match than one might think. So when you talk about how everyone has agency, that's exactly in a way what my work is about.
Great.
So before I go on, I thought I'd just say sort of very briefly something about the education that I'm heading, and also very briefly about the research I'm undertaking, both in terms of KOV projects and as a PhD, because I think what I'm going to talk about is going to make much more sense in that context. So the MFA in Dance and Participation that I'm heading is an education for dancers who already have a practice and who are interested in finding ways of involving people directly into the making and the dancing. And that can be done in a myriad of ways. We operate mainly with approaches, or we operate only with approaches that are, let's say, pedagogically and socially responsible. So, I mean, there are many ways of dealing with participation, right? But that's kind of the area that we're in. And then very briefly about the research that I am undertaking, as I'm very broadly interested in the child as choreographer and as choreographic material. So that means I'm interested in involving them in what you could call a otherwise professional practice. I'm interested in creating ways of working where we can meet and collaborate. I wouldn't say non-hierarchically, because I don't think such a thing exists, but where we try to find proposals that we can go into not as experts and non-experts, but as people. Yeah. And the kind of approach I used to do that now is getting a little bit nerdy is that rather than working on expressive language, so like here's an idea, I'm going to express it through movement, we try to work on expressive ideas instead. That doesn't mean that there's not movement, there is, but it means that the movement is not a translation of an idea. Please do interrupt me if it doesn't make any sense whatsoever what I'm saying. I mean it. So, I thought, what can I share today since I have no idea so far? Well, now I know what knowledge transfer is or could be. I even found a quote in a text I wrote where I said that one of the things I wanted to avoid was edification and knowledge transfer. maybe we can change that today. I hope so. I think it's already changing. So I thought maybe what I can do is provide a practice example. So we have something concrete to maybe or maybe not latch things onto. And the images that are running here have got to do with this example. And it's a project which was both a teaching situation, it was research, and it was a performance. And called it Luftig. It's a project that I did with actually an Austrian artist called Lisa Hinterreitner. Yeah. And we've been working for a long time on air as a material, and also produced some performances in relation to that, and developed some ways of working with air as material that we want to share with others. So we got together, we worked with a group of students from the education that I'm running, so from here in Copenhagen, and we worked with them for a few days, 3 days I think it was, 3 intensive days, where we transferred some of the principles of the work we had been doing with wind and air to them. And those principles were to only use the mechanical means of your own body and pieces of cardboard to move wind around. It means that the experience of the piece is not visual, but it's a sensation, it's a felt sensation of air touching your body. So this is what the audience senses. And this is the principle that we passed on. So really open, really. Yeah. We transferred the rules also. So, you could say you could take a fan and just let it spin, and that would be another way of working with air moving. But we restricted it to these cardboard pieces of various sizes. So this is the idea, and we hand it over to the students in what we kind of call Lab 1. Could call Lab 1. And they work with it for some days, and they find ways of working with that they're interested in. Very quickly, they found out that they can only work with this material, they can only understand this material by their own experience of it. Does that make sense? I mean, you can't see it, so you have to both learn to control it as a material, so it can do a lot, right? Even with a little piece of paper, it can be very dead. It's very fine. Yeah. So you have to learn how to control it, but you can only learn how it transfers to someone else by experiencing it. So if Georg was to learn to use air as a material in this choreographic context, he would have to try it on his own body, what it feels like as well, and that makes it instantly communal. I mean, I can sit like this, but it's not very refined what I can do. But if we're several people together, there are many more options. So it's both about the sort of personal experience of this material on your body, but the knowledge can only be attained in collaboration with others. So that was Lab 1. Then the students there planned a kind of two-day workshop with some local students from Salzburg, Musische Gymnasium. Is that good pronunciation?
Very good.
Very good.
Very good.
And worked with some young people from there. I think it's important to say it was not part of the young people's curriculum. They had chosen, it was sort of there was a choice that they wanted to take part in it. And they work with them for 2 days. Different sort of workshopy things they had made up, race with cardboard pieces and plastic bags, these kind of things, exercises to understand the material. And then together they compose a performance loop over those 2 days. So there's Lab 1, where there's from Lisa and I, the sort of artist behind it, we transfer some things and then propose a space to work within, and then the students develop something from that, and they propose that to the young people. Then together with the young people, they create this performance situation. And this is from the performance itself. So this is kind of like the third wheel, I would say, is the performance situation, where they perform the things that they have come up with. And they came up with things that both had to do with the bodies of the audience and the sort of tactile experience that they would receive, but also with air and the space in general. The way that these performance loops work is that they're fairly short. I mean, maybe it's self-explanatory when they've had 5 days in total to make it. 3 days by themselves and 2 days with the young people. So let's say 2 days to make it really. So they make a 10-minute loop that they repeat. I'm going to see if I can explain this right, but because I think it's important. So there's the performers. There's 7 young people and 5 adults. And the performance loop runs in a way where they're divided into 3 groups, and there's always one group being a part of the audience. Yeah? So there's 2 groups performing and 1 being part of the audience. It means that this becomes a very much of a circular learning situation, because you get to both, again, be an audience to experience what's going on and perform it. And you do this in loops, so you have several tries, and you learn from every time you sit in the audience, and you learn from every time that you're performing it, what the potential is of this situation that you created. Because again, you couldn't know it till the people who are the audience are in there, what the potential is. So they're working it out as they go along. And this is very central, this kind of jumping or layered experience, where it's as I said before, it's like it's a sort of a teaching, researching situation. It's also an audiencing experience, and it's also a performing experience at the same time. The people we haven't talked about here are the audience members. Now, when you bring in children as performers, not surprisingly, a lot of the audience members know these children. Yeah, there's also other audience members turning up as part of a festival. So but a lot of them know them. It turned out sort of a very, very communal, very open experience, I would say. Full of very curious audience members, actually. So a very nice situation there. What is sort of, let's say, peaky about it is the role of the children, because the children very much take care of the adults here. The children and the adults who are performing, they're the same. They're not performing different tasks. It's not like that. They're totally doing the same things. But it's different if an adult sits down and performs like a personal treatment on you, and if it's a child. Yeah, we're not used to children taking care of us like this and being in control like that. The audience member goes into a situation, they have no idea what's going to happen, but the children are totally in control. So this interests me. Because one thing that is very important here is that we're not dealing with air or wind as a theme. We're dealing with it purely as a material. Now that doesn't mean that the people who are in it, either as performers, makers, or as audience members, don't have a personal experience of it thematically, so to speak, because they do. I mean, in the process, I had one student who was like, after half a day or something like that of working with it, she was like, I don't think I can do this. I think I have to back out of this project. Because for her, this idea of moving wind from others just brought up images of, sort of a slave and master relation. Someone being forced to do this for a very long time on someone else. So that was the thing for her. Is it in Austria you have this föhn thing? Mm-hmm. Yeah, the föhn is like tell me if I'm wrong, but it's like a wind that goes over the mountain and comes down in particularly dry wind that people can get like mad, literally mad from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get headaches, but you can also really go crazy from it. So this is one sort of idea of wind. My idea, maybe Pernille is the same, but I'm like, the West Coast or in Bornholm on the rocks, it's refreshing, it's lovely. I love wind. It's like, invigorating, right? So there's so many different sort of personal relations to it, but we don't talk about that in this process. We leave it be. People can bring it up, of course they want, but that's not the starting point. So in that sense, this is, I think, a way of dealing with, I don't know if it's knowledge transfer, maybe it's knowledge transfer, you can tell me that, Georg. But a way of dealing with it where it's both, the framework is extremely tight, actually, but the goings-ons and the let's say learning that can go in there, I hope is rich and manifold. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I prepared a few questions for you. As you know, I sent them to you beforehand. But it's a setup.
Yeah.
So I cheated a little bit. But I'm thinking you probably have some questions for each other now after the presentation. So before I start asking all of my questions, maybe you have something you want to ask each other based on what you just said.
Laura, you want to start? I think you have been writing that.
I have a lot of notes. Got to make a choice here.
And you have posted.
No, I think I would ask. Well, obviously, because I'm interested in children and young people specifically. Yeah. But that's in a way I'm just interested in them because it's like a particular group you can define, right, in terms of age. And now you mentioned children and old people are specific groups. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit more about this idea of reaching out to people with who live in particular circumstances or belong to particular groups.
Yeah, maybe I bring an example from this open arts program, because there we are mainly interested in getting closer to target groups, but also, as you mentioned, younger and elderly people, also challenge people, and how to identify, on the one hand, what is the need experience of them, what can they take out of arts, and also to create a mindset of artists and creatives, how to actually express themselves or how to get in touch with them, because we are talking about relationships. I mean, this is so a substantial question, how relationships are and trust is built within a system. And I think especially if you're working with people which you're not in a kind of corporational eye-to-eye level setup, you really have to bring in a lot of sensitivity. And I think this is what I learned from your talk as well. I mean, using wind as a material totally switched my mindset of, because then this is, so to say, the media. And I'm a media scientist, so the media is the massage we know, or the message. And so kind of maybe find out connections and find out channels of exchange within the setup of, for example, artists and children or artists and elderly people was the first step. And then the second step is how to establish a form of interaction which can be repeated. So still I'm working here from the scientific field. Having an experiment means that I can do it again, and if I change one circumstance, if I change one relation, I can observe what's changing. So in a way, it's a learning process as well for developing a kind of new practice or kind of developing further with the experiment. What has to be 100% clear is that we have to be very honest in all directions of communication, because nobody should have the master-slave experience, as you also mentioned. And I think this is a kind of very important thing, that there is the power structure within, I mean, literally the power structure within communication and exchange. So if there is, in Austria, there's to say on eye level, I'm not using it. I'm now using it 2 times, but I'm actually not using it, because it's always the question, yeah, what eye level? Is it my eye level, and now I'm explaining you, and now I'm treating you on eye level, but so it doesn't work out like that. So in a way, and I think I can also relate to that what you said, bringing in people who are grown-ups or believe they are grown-ups and children, and bringing in a setup where they can equally exchange and communicate, needs a lot of sensitivity for what kind of media do we use. If we use legal, I think the children would be much better than the grown-ups. And when I look into my daughter's poetry, I have to say, I have to go to school again. So I'm not sure if this is answering your question, but it brings a little bit of impression in it.
Certainly. Thank you.
Do you have anything you want to...
I tried to already reflect now in my answer a lot to what I think connect, because in the beginning I thought, yeah, kind of a special setup. We are very complementary in a way, but it showed that this is working out very well. So there is not. It's more like a comment than a question. Sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah, I think also the reason why I thought that was so interesting for you, to have the two of you here together, is actually also the whole idea about equality and participation and inclusion, because knowledge transfer can be a very powerful word also as well, because there's someone who has the knowledge and they pass it on to someone else. That could sound out kind of like be the old scheme, I would like to call it, because I truly hope and wish for that we move into another scheme where knowledge transfer is not about someone who knows a lot and who has the right answers, who transfers something to someone else. And I think in each of your ways, I think actually that's the way you're working, and that's what you're concerned with. And I think my personal opinion is I think that's the way forward. And it's also something that we are working with in the art schools, that how can we, the last conversation we had, Henrik Svejdal, who's a rector here at the Rhythmic Music Conservatory, he explained it as the artist in position number 1. Like, look at me, see what I'm doing, I'm giving you something in my performance, in what it is that I'm doing. But how can we develop that position? How can we sort of change gears or make sure that we have different gears that we can move into? So it's not just the, look at me, I'm doing this and I'm transferring something to you. If we want to develop or expand or explore or investigate the way that we as artists can be in society, I think this whole concept of knowledge transfer holds a lot of different tools that we are not exploring already. which leads me to my question, actually, to both of you. But let's start with you, Georg. What do you think that? What potentials do we have to explore the artist's role in society using the concept of knowledge transfer, as you know it, as you're working with it?
Maybe two things to point out. I mean, as we see here, we are a small group of people, and it reminds me to when I started to work with this topic in Austria, because we kind of called out, and there have been showing up 5 people, and now we have a couple of hundreds, even thousands of people who are knowing about it. So the first thing is how to create a knowledge transfer community, or how to create a community of relation, of usefulness, how to embed that in a way that it makes sense to do that. The second thing is as well, we should maybe get rid of this idea of pole position and excellence. I know we cannot get rid of that so easily, because if we look into funding schemes, if we look into art schools, for sure we need this kind of idea of excellence. But on the other hand, knowledge transfer is more like a social and cultural activity. In a way, for sure, knowledge has a tremendous important part of that, but in a way, what do you actually identify as knowledge, and when does it have the tag knowledge? So in a way, I think we have to totally open up this discussion on when knowledge is counted as knowledge and for what sense. And on the other hand, if we take out the pressure of excellence, even if it's taking place, but in the beginning, always kind of creating these spearheads, this kind of narrowing down the approach that we get the essence out of it. So it means we take always a lot of things out of complexity. And I think when I'm looking from my point of view, I think dealing with these complexities is much more important than eliminating noise. And I think this is why we should not narrow down the approach of knowledge transfer. We should open up that there can be a kind of counter movement to that what we normally know as knowledge institutions, which is a very harsh term. If some politician, I'm in Denmark, that's good. I don't think they are on that, because this means like cut off the head of the universities. This means bringing this more to a kind of basic approach that everybody can connect, everybody can, and society has more opportunities to let things in and out, to deal. And for this reason, I think artists or artistic practice has a very specific position in that, because it's not so, in a way, proved or proof-able.
It doesn't have to be proved.
Yeah. And evaluate it and put it down into figures and numbers and scalings and exponentials and stuff like that. It's not. We are not counting so much heads. And this now I'm talking a bit university business, because normally there's head counting, and then there's student head counting, and there is business per student, and there is money per student. And if you sit and contract stuff with people, this has nothing to do with my idea of knowledge transfer. So, finaling up, answer to your question, this is a really new approach. This is approach which is a very social and cultural approach, and it's an experiment still. And it's important to grow a community of knowledge transfer worldwide.
We're on it. Thank you. Laura, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking that these ways of understanding knowledge or dealing with art and society can coexist and should coexist. I mean, I don't believe sort of in a paradigm that's ended and new and is opened up. I think excellence and also in sort of a, let's say, sort of craft way can certainly coexist with other way of engaging with people, and I think it should. There's a time and place for everything. I'm just happen to be intensely interested in one way of working, right? I thought a little bit about also this idea of craft, actually, and excellence, and you could end up in a situation where you just kind of shift the thing that you're excellent at as an artist, you see. So you could be totally excellent at your instrument. That could be, for me, it could be my body as an instrument. I can be an expert in that. But I could also, and this is maybe what my students are trained to be, I'm aspiring to be excellent in terms of, let's say, creating these spaces for collaboration and making of art. And maybe they're not so different, I mean, I don't think it will be less centralized by making that shift. It'll be maybe similar people who will be experts at it. It's just a slightly different way of being an expert. Does that make sense? So definitely they can coexist, I think. Then I of course, you're right. What is knowledge, and what do we mean when we talk about knowledge? That's a huge one, right? I mean, and I think in this context, perhaps a thing. Okay, so these things can coexist. I think what in my opinion is outdated is the artist or whoever trying to, thinking that they know what others might be interested in, or know that they know about that person's life world. I mean, you cannot never ever know that. We're past that, right? So I think there's a shift there. That's a thing that's of the past. We cannot assume that we have knowledge of other people's experience of being in the world. So that we have to be curious about. I think that's dated. But I don't think I think it's totally fine to be a super virtuosic whatever artist and to share that also in terms of as a knowledge that you share with others. The masterclass is not dead. That's what I'm saying.
Definitely not.
Oh.
We're having one in the afternoon.
And it's very much alive. Thank you. I think, will you ask the questions that you had before? Would you? We just need a microphone for you.
Maybe I will ask another.
Yeah.
More about.
Well, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Liv, and it just came to my mind because I was in a seminar this Monday in existential entrepreneurship, and we talked about this that art is important for people. And then it came to my mind that if we were more supported by the government and the states, would it then be a necessity? Would we talk so much about this necessity, about the art, that we have these, you're talking about the sharing process, that we are coming out to people that we want to share our art, so it's more equalized, maybe, that it's more out in the whole society and all the great thoughts about it, and also all the possibilities in creating and so on. And that's why it's an odd question, because maybe it goes a bit on another path of what you're talking about. But again, because we are talking a lot about these things, also with sharing and knowledge transfer and so on. And it just came to my mind, are we talking about this? Is it also, for my own sake personally, is it also a drive because we are in a time where art is down on the scale, especially here in Denmark, but also other countries, of course. So I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Really good question.
Yeah, it is. It is a good question. Maybe I can try and speak a little bit from the sort of side of dance and choreography, because there we're in a situation where it's a small field. It's a really small field, and it's not yet that well established. Talk just about Denmark. It's not that there's not many Egnsteater, for instance, that have dance. It's just a few. Or based primarily on dance. We don't have dance as a subject in schools. This is a big difference from music, for instance, and also from fine arts. So there's sort of it's not. I think for sure, if everyone had sort of a base level of engagement with the art form throughout our country, throughout other countries, the discussion would be quite different. It would start somewhere else. I'm sorry, that's a very simple answer, but yeah. I mean, this would be my dream, was that it was something that was happening all the time. But of course, we should not assume that everyone thinks that this is important. I mean, a lot of people don't. I started teaching some kids the other day, and most of them are like, woo, super engaged and having fun. Then one kid goes, why is it important that we're doing this? Why do we have to dance in schools? What are we actually learning? And I was like, well, we don't have time for that talk now, but but good question. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I try to give a more structural answer. I mean, looking into history, normally I would say, because you also referred to that maybe art has not the same standing point as maybe a few hundred years ago. What we always avoid to talk is about money. I mean, we talk about funding, we talk about support, but basically if you look in the coevolutional development of arts, it was always very much related to money. If there is a king who has paid something, or if there is some kind of Mäzenentum, how we call it in German, that somebody is giving you money, or there is the state who is kind of keeping the museums alive and stuff like that. So I call it unconscious biasing. I mean, if artists are thinking about entrepreneurship, it is an urgent need to talk about money, and not as a kind of black entity in life. I mean, there is also, money is a kind of energy. We also can talk about values. So maybe money is just a form of value. And then we have to see how we can kind of figure out how, and also kind of contribute to the society, because there is a surplus artistic and cultural activities, and especially within the pandemic we have seen how much need people have to experience love, to experience beauty, to experience art, to interact within cultural frameworks. So, but we have also seen that the kind of economical system is very stiff, because this immediately overreacts with fear. So because if the stock exchange is not working out anymore, if you cannot sell houses anymore and there are no jobs anymore, our whole system is within seconds down. And this is in the counterpart. Artistic thing is always kind of reflecting on the situation. There have been artists in war situations. There have been artists as hackers within the first web bubble. So artists don't have just a role. They always identify their role, and I think it's kind of a unconscious biasing means we have to recreate the stereotype of the artist, and not for our sake, as you said, sake. It's for the sake of society, and it's our work we have to do that it has been recognized.
Yeah. If anyone wants to say something, just break in, because yeah.
I'm thinking a little bit about something. Trying to see if I can formulate it. That there's also something as a like when you talk about sort of responding to or reacting as an artist to current problems in society. That's one way of being an artist, right? I mean, it's also a matter of what we define as art. You know, if we go far enough back, you would get your guitar out in the local pub, and that, I mean, you perform for your family and friends, and that would be art. So this is a special kind of institution that we call art making now. And if we talk about how it's spread out in society, that's maybe also, maybe we need to negotiate that a little bit. What it is we define as belonging to the art scene. Thank you.
And I think, Georg, you used the word entrepreneurship a few times. And that's very brave of you. In a sense, for someone who's been working with entrepreneurship in the arts, developing it as a field of knowledge in the art school for 10, 12 years, I think. I know it can be a very dangerous word, because a lot of people will back off, as you said, and think neoliberalism and all the capitalism and all the stuff, which entrepreneurship could also be, but it can also be something else. And I think for artists and people working in the arts, it is something different. and we need, that has to be developed as what could that be. And that's what we've been doing with, like in CAKI, where I work for the last 10 years in schools, and now also with the ENTRE program that we have for teachers and researchers in the art schools. And the exact idea with having entrepreneurship as a field of knowledge is to strengthen the agency of the artist in society, and to enable and empower the artist to be able to take a place in society and develop the role of the artist from the position number one, or the carrier of knowledge, to an audience who will then receive. So there's a sender and there's a receiver. We need to work with that role for a variety of reasons, but not at least to empower the artist to have agency in society, I think. So in terms of that, what a knowledge transfer and artist position and entrepreneurship as such, what kind of potentials do you see we as at art institutions, as educations, not institutions, but educations? I know you in Austria it's academies or universities. Here we call it art schools, but it's the same. We train artists to become professional. What do you think that the potential is in this, if we look out ahead into the future, gaze into the future in 5-10 years time, and if we really work with entrepreneurship and knowledge transfer in the art institutions, how could the scenery look? What do you think? What could we discover? What could be developed?
I would be happy to answer that.
Go ahead.
I will not stick into the language trap, because basically it's always a question of translating something, right? I'm now more confident to use the term entrepreneurship because I know A, what I'm meaning with it, and B, if somebody asks me, I will totally flip the whole situation within a few seconds that we are not talking business education. The funny thing is, and why I have this confidence, and first of all, is 5 years ago, if I would have been to our student organization at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna and say, hey, I'm the guy responsible for entrepreneurship here, they will take something and they light me up. It's like, you never should come again. 2 years ago, they came to the rector and said, we need entrepreneurship education. They didn't call it entrepreneurship education. They said, we want to know how to do this, how to do a startup. We want to have at least basic knowledge about things like that, and then how we can transform that with our kind of knowledge. So they have now also the confidence that they don't just embed, this startup ideology, I need just 1 million and a programmer and an exit in 2 years, all is fine. No, they don't have even this idea of entrepreneurship, because this is a kind of Californian-made idea which has been then trained in several institutions, and then it has transported to other European countries, and we have really problems to embed that into our culture because we don't have the money behind it, we don't have the tickets and all these kind of things. So forget about it. The thing would be, what is Europe, or in a way Eurocentristic thinking, and hopefully not forgetting that there is also a global south, and there is also Asia, and there is also Africa, as somebody said once, the final market, entrepreneurship term. What does that mean in a kind of development? And now we come to this vision of knowledge transfer. So maybe entrepreneurship can be used as wind, can be used as a material, as a skill, as something I can use to make something greater good. And I think this is now the big umbrella, because you pointed out how would a future with a positive connotation of entrepreneurship look like. And I think if not only art schools and art universities, if this kind of understanding of entrepreneurship could be switched or imaginized into something that this is an inspirational thinking, this is needs a lot of creativity, needs a lot of teamwork, but also needs a lot of value on several levels, money included, then I think we can shift this understanding as well in a kind of decision-making level of how EU formats, Horizon 2020 or something like that, can be designed. And we see already, since the pressure is getting higher, especially on sustainability and Green Deal and New European Bauhaus and what's going on out there, even if they just create, again, some boxes where they believe then people from culture and art will contribute. So still we have to be critical about that, and we have to also have a voice in that, and not just, oh, at least they see us, now we can do something. So kind of co-creation is the, I would say, buzzword at the moment, right? So co-creation, and this will lead to co-evolution. So this will also show that not there is a decision maker, there is a dialogue, or even a polylogic approach, because dialogue always means two. One is saying something, the other. So polylogic approach. And if we can also raise the sensibility for the needs, or, for example, bring in more diversity in the system. So again, seeing the needs of elderly people, seeing the needs of our youth, of people who are now having the idea, what will I study? What will I do in the next 20 years when I'm learning? So I think there are many ways to do that, but there is not a kind of general paradigm shift, I want to call it. No. I think this paradigm shift is over, because we are having one paradigm shift after another, and then you think, another paradigm shift? We had the last paradigm shift 2 years ago. So doesn't make sense to always kind of bring everything so stiff. I think it has to be more process-oriented. And in this sense, I think small steps on many directions, and the most important thing, bring in more people. Bring in people, and also bring in the confidence that this makes sense. This is something you also can make a living out of this. It's not just looking Netflix. I have nothing to do, so I do Netflix. So...
I would agree, and then I would add to that, like in my sort of future dream, maybe I think we have a little bit of tendency to build the house and then fill it with stuff in terms of culture and in terms of art and in terms of sharing it and meeting other people. I would build the house and then put something in it. My ideal dream future would be that everything's a little bit more nerdy, in a sense, that we have artists who are such great entrepreneurs that they manage to build the house that suits their practice and suits their artistic interest. So we gain sort of a super diverse platform of different artistic practices and cultural outputs that fit both the artists who sprout them and the people who live in the places where they exist. That would be my dream.
You wanted to raise a question. So there's the microphone as well.
Hi, I'm Josephine. And thanks a lot for sharing your projects and thoughts and everything. It's so inspiring. I was wondering how you view yourselves as kind of head of institutions, research programs, leaders in some sense around these programs and very visionary thoughts. Since there is this image of the scientist in the laboratory always like setting up a framework that somehow, though you try to be objective in your research, you always end up kind of, you constitute the framework, and somehow you end up still, you create a discourse or something that creates in some sense right or wrongs, or you invite, or you kind of might attract certain people and not other people. And I think this is really interesting when you talk about sustainability and equality and diversity. Like, how do we view ourselves as the people who are setting up these frameworks? I did a workshop entitled Gender Diverse Opera, where we wanted to research, we wanted to find other voices not coming from the opera world, because we thought there is a reason why we only see very cisgendered persons entering the opera world. Like, there are only cisgendered characters to play within this. So how if the framework was a different one? Like, we want gender diversity to be fit into opera, but already saying like gender diversity and saying opera, there's a huge both clash of worlds where people would be like, okay, but am I here because of this or that? Do I really fit in? Also, you are putting up some very strong discourses, which would still attract some people, and some people would never go. In this workshop was really interesting. And it's very much about, it's both creating a new sense of opera. It's also a very social work, and considered thinking a lot about equality and representation, diversity. But what it came down to in the end was, I think me and the other person creating this workshop had to go home and really think about ourselves. How diverse were we really setting this framework up? Like the whole week of workshopping ended dealing with us breaking down our roles as leaders, because we would somehow confine whatever could come out of this just being in the room, being the people who set up the framework, being the people who kind of funded this, coming down to money once again. We will always need money, even for, if we start, as you said, Laura, which is really beautiful, not with the house filling art in, but start with the art movement. We need money from somewhere. And those people giving us money, they might have an idea of what we should be doing with this money. So how do you view yourselves as initiative takers, leaders around this? Because, we are defining rights and wrongs, somehow also non-willing when we, stand up for this.
Lots of questions in one.
No, it's such an important question. So where to start? I mean, first I can say I'm from an art form that I think I can say without anyone getting very angry that it is fairly new and it's still establishing itself, and that means that on one hand this defining oneself narrows it down. So the kind of dance that I am preoccupied with is very Eurocentric. And it's very extremely contemporary. So I deal with a choreographic concept, not it's just like it's so narrow. So there's that. On one hand, we want to be a lot of things for a lot of people. On the other hand, the field somehow needs to have an identity. So there's that struggle out there, I feel. In terms of the education that I'm running, for sure, it's something that we're hyper aware of. There are these gates along the way before you get to a master's level, right? I mean, first you have to somehow meet, in my case, dance and choreography, and at some point you have to become interested in it. You have to see yourself somehow mirrored on the stages, so you can imagine yourself up there. This is a problem currently. Getting much better, but still. And then you need to have access, you need to live somewhere where you can even engage in dance and choreography. And then you need to be accepted in one of very few places on bachelor's educations, either here or abroad. And then when you've been through that, you can apply for a master's and then maybe get a place. So that means that the filter that people have been through before they get knocking on my door, on our door at this education that I'm head of, it's such a small segment of people already. Now, within that, of course, we try to be hyper-aware of trying to encapsulate as many different identities and artistic approaches as possible. And I think we can accommodate that also. This is important because we offer an education which should be for people that we think can actually get something out of it. So it doesn't make sense to take someone in who will not thrive in that area, who will not be able to fulfill the dreams and plans that they have for their career. So we try to, in the way the program is built, to have an openness and a curiosity and a flexibility towards the group that is there, so that we can shape it along the way to a high degree. Yeah, I think that's what I want to say for now.
Yeah, thanks for your comment. I think you're addressing a very personal question, and I mean answering as an old white Eurocentric man. With a cis background, I mean, what should I say? You really put the finger on the one. But the thing is, when you're not always reflecting everything, but you're addressing as well the power structures. And I mean, I have learned a lot working together with the Academy of Fine Arts, because they have a very specific profile on gender, inclusion, non-binary. They have 70% of foreign students, 40% from Asia or from the global south. So you really, in this small biotope, you have the chance to really also question that things, and you are questioned for sure. On the other hand, it's so much people's business. For example, if you bring the opera, I think in this case, this is really it's a decision-making thing. What has to go on? I mean, if you put somebody as director of the opera who is actually kind of refreshing this old idea, nothing will change. So I think it has to be really exemplified. It doesn't say like every opera in the world now has to be different. There should be a coexistence of that classical historical forms, but there should be as well an opportunity to maybe really say we exemplify. Why do we say there is at least one opera a year which is showing that and kind of bringing that in? Or even better, if you're addressing leadership, which is one of the very core topics within our knowledge transfer system as well, because what is leadership and how does leadership apply to all levels of action and stuff like that, and what kind of mindset should a leader have? And we know what kind of mindset should a leader not have. I mean, I'm from Austria. So, and then in my personal experience, I think your question also addresses, for me, the need to open up for teamwork, because it's not possible to now, as an artist, be everything. Because art and creativity and applying that and writing an opera or making an art piece is time intensive, is money expensive as well. So how could you be next to that also a businessman or a businesswoman, and next to that you should be your PR agent? So basically, we have to let go from this idea that there's always this single person. There's this Damien Hirst, or however you want to call it. There is always a team. There should be always a team, and I think this is what should be much more addressed in all cultural industries. That without teams, it's not working. Mm-hmm. It's not working with one. It's maybe working with two, but it's much better working if you have much more people supporting a general idea. And the idea will change as well, because you kind of always have to figure out the channel that everybody can still identify with the project. And if just you identify with the project, maybe you're already far, far within the fog and you think it's still valuable or important, mm-hmm. but then you lost and then you're alone in the fog. Mm-hmm. But so, teamwork. Leadership
and leadership. And can I just add one thing? I just thought it also has to. I think that we have to shake this idea of what excellence is. We talked about excellence before. Like, you cannot, if you want to diversify a field, you cannot stick to a pre-existing idea of what excellence is. You have to open up. And this, I think, it can be a scary, scary process, because what are the parameters then? When can you know that something is good or not good? How do you do that? But we have to dare to do that, or we're going to get nowhere, right? And that takes a kind of sort of curiosity, knowledge, and a trust in your gut feeling, which I think is totally central there, and which I think could spring from things like super nerdy artistic research. To do that, you have to really shift things. I'm looking at Christopher now. But I think that's maybe with working with art could, I hope, lend you the skills that would allow you to go with that gut feeling of your sense of daring to bring in things that are totally unknown to you already.
I think also what you described there, and going back to your question, Josephine, that's also exactly what is in entrepreneurship as a field of knowledge. That's something that when we try to transfer that or stimulate that in the art institutions and in the education, is really to get behind the artists so they can use it in any way you want to do to change the world, to make artworks, to engage with people, to whatever it is that you want to do. So it's really about, I think, for you talked about power positions and how we use the power that we have. And I think from my perspective and from my point of view, for talking from CAKI, it's about standing behind and helping to facilitate. And just saying, so this is there's a whole field of knowledge. I know a lot and I can tell you about it, but it only becomes knowledge when you use it, right? Then it becomes your knowledge. And it becomes your way of doing things. And there are as many ways of doing this as we have artists. So, and also, like using the language we're using now, we've been saying entrepreneurship a lot of time, and I love that because I think it's a power tool, and it's a power tool that it's yours. It's not ours. It doesn't belong to us. It belongs to you, and you're supposed to be using it. If you want to. But I think it can really help empowering what it is that you are doing. And I don't know, the language thing, talking about entrepreneurship, talking about power structures, talking about inclusions, I think it's really one of the things that I teach a lot to. It used to be students here at the school, but now it's actually the teachers and the researchers and stuff, is to like use your language and talk about things and develop this within your world and what you're interested in. Like you take your deep burning interest in whatever it is that you're doing, and then you use this to go out into the world and you talk about it. So also when we talk about entrepreneurship, but we also talk about business models. And usually when I say that, I can just see people go business models, but it's really just a way to work with like the money streams coming into your practice or your artistic business or whatever it is that you're doing, how you can develop that, because then once you take control of it, like you can work with it and you can do and realize stuff that you want to do, and you can include others, and you can work in teams, and you can, you get empowered in a way. So yeah, that was a long answer to your question, but it was just to say that I think the way that we try to use the power that we have as in CAKI, as a center and an institution, is to get behind you and just help and cheer. Yeah. So there was some questions. I think both Christopher and the Middemark and. Go. Is it on?
It's on. Okay, I'm Christopher from the International Center for Knowledge in the Arts, who is gladly kind of co-hosting this event as well. Yes, lots of thoughts. But on the topic of business models, I think we have a very good example right now in Denmark of the work by Jens Horning that's made so much headlines around the whole world. Take the money and run, where he basically took the money that he borrowed from the museum in order to reconstruct some of his earlier works, and instead of doing that, he took the money, and the work is called "Take the Money and Run." So, just as an example of how artists are really good at appropriating and subverting and using the market, using business models as media, almost as material for artworks. And I think we should not forget this dimension of art's, let's say, poetic and imaginative and interventionist power, that it can also take the things that we are thinking about as something we should kind of also learn artists to make entrepreneurship their own and so on. We might not be thinking this step, but I think we should kind of let there be space for this kind of, let's say, turning on its head also what we expect at all from these fields. And this for me is a sign also of a healthy society where this can thrive. And I think we're seeing a lot of examples around the world where this kind of work is not maybe thriving, or we see the tendency of liberal democracies emerging, and also new kind of art, or not new, but other ideas of what art should do in society and so on. So I think I'm not sure I have a question. I think we have a great responsibility there. At the same time, when you were talking, I could not help thinking about Rancière's idea of the ignorant schoolmaster, this famous book, which also was an exhibition recently, I think, in Denmark, where he's basically giving his students just access to the books and stops teaching and finds out they learn much better. This was maybe something Laura was also talking about, touched upon, like at some point, infrastructure. And maybe this leads to a question that also connects back to this idea of having a kind of a climate for things to emerge that are unexpected. What do we need in terms of spaces or infrastructures, or do you have examples of environments in which you worked with where, well, some kind of emergence of new knowledge or unexpected positions could take place that also had this artistic kind of challenging and yeah, big question, but do you have experiences or hopes?
Mm-hmm.
I will have a long answer, Laura.
I'll take a short answer, and then you can take the long one. I can speak from my experience as an artist and also now sort of a wannabe scholar. When I was only practicing freelance dancer and choreographer, I had to make them up myself, those houses. I had to create my own company and find ways of surviving that would make it possible for me to do the work. And then I would also have to do work in institutions that were existing and do what they needed me to do in order for me to survive, basically. Yeah. I also had to be very smart about moving around different European countries in order to, go where you make the money, live where you don't pay so much rent, these kind of things, all of that. Actually, where I have found the freedom to do what you're talking about here is in this sort of very, very extremely privileged position I am in. I have access to research. So I can do my KV projects. I can do my doctoral studies, and this way of dealing with artistic knowledge gives me freedom to really speculate at a level that I didn't feel was available to me when I was a practicing artist. Now, I would like all artists to have access to that kind of speculation in practice that I have now. We are so few who have that, and I would like that to be the norm. Mm.
I like that you mentioned the subversion and the kind of irritation of artists or arts can bring into society, and it's in a healthy or at least a substantial part of what art can contribute in contemporary ways, because I think we still should not forget that there is no subversiveness without power as well. So I think you have to be brave to do something like that, to take the money and run, because there is a system which tries to make serious consequences for your action. And on the other hand, I think it shows as well that the artistic field is not trying to adapt now to something else because they are not confident enough anymore. So it's more about enriching the artistic aspect and dealing with contemporary science which are out there to work with that. And this is also something which is more from the content side of art. For sure, with the knowledge transfer, we are also more on the supportive side of that level. So I think the content for me is not always the most important one. But when it becomes important is the kind of experimental environment we are using here. And I definitely have to say the university is not the space, not the kind of university as we know it. I mean, I talk a lot with architects, and they tell me that so many universities, they don't want to have libraries anymore. They want to have learning spaces, meeting spaces, group spaces, where they can just book not even a room, a table with a certain kind of elements they would use for their development level. And at the academy, I did now a really stupid thing. Everybody thinks it's a stupid thing, and I'm also not sure if it will turn out a good thing. But we created something, it's called Impact Academy, and it's a 200-year-old house which is not functional. There's no heating, it's limited water, limited toilets, limited everything, but it's a villa. It has a beautiful garden, and everything is like a 200-year-old building. And it's not allowed to take it down, and it's owned by the government. And I told them, we will just take care about the minimal costs, give us that thing, and we will create there the Impact Academy. First of all, I had to argument why I not take a new building. I said, it's very sustainable to take an old one. And it's very vintage on that side. And now we are really trying to set up within this new configuration, because there is no configuration in a sense. Nobody knows actually how people have lived 200 years ago in that villa. So there is no kind of preconditioned architectonical element which can be, so to say, enriched or understood by a mindset of people between 20 and 40. So the use concept is now getting a bit out of hand, because first of all, everybody made a studio there. And then they, as normally, because it's not in the city center, nobody came there. So I said, no studios anymore, because I give you keys, you have a key, and then you don't show up, so it's a closed circuit installation. That's not good. So we took away the keys again and said every space you can use. We just use the ground floor for our vocational training and education. We do photo shootings there to get some money in, and there is a Bollywood movie they now are planning to shoot there, because it's all having this. So in a way, we don't have a use case, but we have the idea that everything what happens there should be impactful. Mm-hmm. And we are so much searching now for this. For these actions, but first of all, we have always to find the first and, so to say, again, stereotyped mindset. Somebody comes and says, wow, that's great, I will have a studio here. And no, studio is not the equivalent we are searching for. Think about something else. 2 weeks later, okay, I will come and we will do now a workshop series which is called The Artist as Consultant, which I totally agree is a cool thing. So we do that. So answer to the question, I don't have an answer to the question, but it's like opening up for processes. It's like creating this free space or this freedom of art within also new structural elements. And I'm more coming from this management perspective, because I'm advisor of the Rectorate and I have to decide things preconditioned on the money side, or what kind of risk can we take. And by this means also try to calculate at least a little bit what's possible, and then create the free space or the freedom around it.
I have a question for both of you, actually. So if we think about all that Christopher's question and also what we have been talking about here, if we wanna enhance and strengthen knowledge transfer in the art institutions with the concept that we've been talking about here today, or the content, what could we do in terms of education? Because I think also a lot of what we have been talking about, and also the question, is something that is sort of outside of the educational programs, right? So it's the Impact Academy. It's outside of the university, and you said you cannot be doing it in university. But the reality is also, and you talked about your professional working life outside of the institutions as well, and now being in the institution, how can you make that available to someone on the outside as well? So there's very much an inside and an outside. And I guess that's also the way it has to be when it's in, educational institutions, because you're there to become educated and to learn something and to find the knowledge in yourself and in the pool of knowledge around you, right? But is there any way that we can make this more come alive inside the teaching programs without destroying? Because as you said before also, Laura, we both need excellence. And we also need something else. So like this, how can we do both? How can we develop both inside the educational programs in the art schools? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think in a without sort of being too big-headed, this is in a way what the course I'm teaching is doing already, just by the very nature of it. It's about participation. So the people who come there are people who want to engage with society in a very direct manner. So they have that interest already, and therefore we can work in a way where we work from the sort of the core artistic interest of each person who's there. Because that aspect is either a part of it already or something that they want to be part of it. So that follows that is it. That is it. That's what we're dealing with. As for other programs, I think there is scope to. I would actually. Okay, now I'm just making something up on the spot here for a study program.
Go ahead,
okay?
feel free.
Okay, what would be very cool, I think, is to have some project that practically engages students, for instance, at bachelor level, with the surrounding society, where you actually get a hands-on experience. So you either work with some people, you work in specific places, you work in the case of performing arts, not only in the big existing institutions that are made for it, but also in other places. And once you get that experience, you start to see possibilities, both the possibilities that are already built in those sorts of collaborations, and some that you could imagine from it. So you let always the artistic interest of the student be the driver, but they have to meet things in order to think of it as a possibility. So that's the thing I can think of that I think would make an impact, because I've seen it happen when you organize things like this. That recently I did a project with students from my education, some students who are studying acting, some students within music who worked with some local, it's called FGU students, it's like youth educations, which is mostly for young people who either have dropped out or don't know exactly where they want to go in terms of their education. And then they work together on a proposal, a very loose proposal that's been set for them, and even those, and I'm talking about academy students, so as our students, even those who go into a project like that with a little bit of skepticism. I mean, how do we have to go out and touch the real world in that way, so to speak? Come out on the other end like, wow, okay, there was some kind of thing going on in that thing we produced there. There was some kind of particular presence and way of working, a tentativeness that is extraordinary, artistically extraordinary, and artistically extraordinary in a way that is felt by the audience that visited those rooms that they established. So I think the hands-on experience outside of our sort of the institutions or houses that call for our presence is necessary to spark that thing in the students. Mm-hmm.
Here I think I will have a short answer. When I'm thinking about my study time, I was not actually quite reachable for ideas like that, because I had to party, I had to do weird hacking stuff, and I was hanging out with 3 or 4 people with having the same idea in mind. So we really have been focusing on that, and we haven't been at all not interested in anybody teaching us something. It was really more like, okay, we now have this space, we have the SGIs, and we can have this network and the possibility to do stuff in the internet. And we have been there only in the night. So I think it's a question of motivation. I mean, because if the question is always to enrich, to enlarge, to make it bigger, I mean, it's pretty sure, I said it before, it's important to create a community about, a mindset about, and to also see a purpose on that. I mean, the motivation is mainly or very often connected to a purpose or to a desire. And this is a very interesting triangle, this purpose-driven entrepreneurship, you might know the term. So every day, all the system is using up anyways these kind of things. So there has to be a purpose, there has to be a desire. And if we are not able, and I think this is not something, this is an intrinsic thing. So as you said, I mean, slowly, very slowly, for sure society is changing. The problem, or at least one of the problems I see, the pressure from outside is getting so tough, because there is this global warming problem in our neck, and it's not going away by being desired by thinking too much about how can we put more entrepreneurship in the education. Should kids learn already with 2 years about entrepreneurship? I mean, there are some crazy people out there, they believe all is getting better if we start much earlier with everything. And I'm totally against it. I think leave the kids as long kids as they are kids, because this is the most inspirational part of their lives. And if they don't learn it there, then I mean, we cannot always talk about everything that is only positive. Everybody has also dark feelings about things as well. And I mean, we see this as well in the art scene. It's not, they are also addressing problematic, critical things. It's not like, as I said before, beautifying the whole thing. So, in a way, I would actually tend to say this has to be done with a very touchy note. This has to be very sensitive, and it has to really have several topics or challenges in mind. And I think one of the big challenges at the moment, and this is why we're talking so much impact, is really that we see that we have to do as humans in general, we have to do something about killing our environment. Because if we kill that, we should not talk about entrepreneurship anymore. So in a way, it's a dark note. But I think for me, this is at the moment the most important thing. And maybe it's easy for me because we mainly work with alumni and we address that as our target groups and young researchers. And we leave the students as the students, and we say the university might change slower as we wish, but as the society as well changes slower, and things are changing slower as we wish, as a kind of a given burden.
Yeah, but it's funny because when you say like the university, we could also say the art schools or the art institutions. Like it's something, going back to the metaphor of the building, because the university or the art school, it's actually just a building, it's a structure. And in that we have the teachers, the researchers, like the people running the place, right? It might take a long time to change them, that's a slow process, but all the students, they already changed. And we as institutions, I'd say we haven't followed them. We are not there yet, right? And they're moving faster than us. So in order for us to be able to give meaningful teaching programs or to stand behind them or to empower them or so, there's a bit of it's very complex how we can do that as institutions. What kind of programs do we make? What do we present? Because it also takes that we as teachers and researchers, we need to be courageous. And I think your class, Laura, or your program is an example of that. And there's stuff going on like around the schools where people and teachers and people working in the art schools take chances, and they don't know if this is going to be a success or if it's going to be a huge failure, like the Impact Academy, or like when you send someone out into the world to do stuff, the potential of failure is always there, and then we as teachers we also need to set it free and give the responsibility, share the responsibility, because of course we want to do the best, and every student should have the potential to develop and be excellent, and everything we can do to support that. But then also at the same time also realizing we cannot use the tools that were used on us, or sort of to speak. So how do we negotiate that space? I think that's really interesting. And can you have the microphone?
Just I'm also I would say in the role of a teacher, because I'm also teaching very new in the music academy, and I was wondering, because that's a huge, also really a interesting thing, that why can't we just the teachers just visit each other's educations, but also see, because the curriculums are so different, and you work in another perspective, and the music programs are working in a total other, and some are a bit behind and some are a bit more developed into that. And I really think that the sentence that you said, that the students come to you to say that this entrepreneurship is important, that's a really that's the message, that also, like you say, the students are aware and want to change things. So why can't the teachers just grab their ass and get going? Because that's really important. And also then it will also be that would be more space for thoughts and also environmental thoughts also from the students, because if they can feel that there's a certain openness and understanding in their personal drive or thoughts, then from the teachers, then something will happen and there will be a flow. But it's a really interesting and also strong. You could say, I don't know if that's the right word, discussion, because there's at the same time there is this thing that when you start on the education, you have to get through all these years where you learn, and you have to learn these handwork things, of course. That is very important also. But I would love, and I say that to my students, that this is a process that you're going into. And I would love that teachers are more aware of that when they start, that this is a process and it doesn't end. So it's not like, because my personal experience with being a student was that I was so serious about it. So I just took all the things they said very, very important. And and then I just skipped all my own thoughts about everything just to be a really great student. And I know that there's students like that a lot, because when you are going on that education, that high level, you really want to grow and you really want to learn. So there is a high thing we could do as teachers, and but it's also very important. So I don't know, but that is my offer or whatever. I would really love to just talk with the head of the schools. That maybe, because I'm doing it myself, but it could be nice that also it was an offer for the teachers just to see, because it is so different. For example, in the dance, I can hear also that you are in another, you have another perspective of this than some of the other programs. Yeah, and also in fine arts, that's also a thing. So, so it's more a comment, not a question, but...
But that actually sort of goes back to what you started with saying, Georg, like the knowledge transfer between the departments in the university when you were presenting why this whole knowledge transfer issue begun at all in your neck of the woods, right? So maybe that's the thing to take from here today also as well, this knowledge transfer between teachers in the schools, between different teaching programs. I think that was also what you were saying, Liv, right? Openness, inclusions, community in the institutions, really. So there's a structural thing to be working with.
There's another question.
Yeah. I don't have a question, I just have a comment to what you said. My name is Anne-Mette, I work at the International Center for Knowledge in the Art with Christopher.
Can you speak up a little bit? No, just...
In this one or for you?
Sorry, bad hearing.
Oh God, I forgot what I was supposed to say.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just saying I think all of what you said is really important, and you can take that and from here as well, but maybe there's also something about understanding your own ecosystem as a material that you can work on as an artist. So what you touch upon today, Laura, quite figurative, is like you have to build your own house. And I think a lot of people are, or a lot of agents within the cultural field are already thinking that and already trying to say that. But what I kind of miss and lack, and what I think maybe this discussion can also further develop into, is that actually have an example of what that is. So examples of how do you actually build your own house, or how do you kind of navigate and use your own infrastructures to also shape a field. So you're not always just responding to a field, but you're shaping it. And that can also be the money. And I don't have the answers, but I think I like the idea of making room for the conversations where you can actually do that and the experimentations of that. And that's what I also think maybe the Impact Academy sounds like it's doing without actually knowing it. But so I'm very much in the idea that you can think more systemically, but you need to kind of also be able to give space for it, but also maybe dare to say that we don't necessarily know what that is yet, but we're trying it out. So it was just a comment to that. Yeah.
I have a comment on that, a short one.
Yeah.
Because I learned something. I just want to put it out that I don't forget it.
Go ahead.
I mean, if this kind of systemical interventional thing, what also that, like, if it's not just the teaching and it's not just the students, because we always, or the researchers, so we are always addressing sort of the quality part of the university. But there is, on the other hand, there is also the facilitation, the cleaning, the librarian, the financial department, the rector, and stuff like that. And maybe that could be seen, and maybe this I will do in the next weeks, trying to bring further this idea of the Impact Academy, as well using that structures to maybe intervene a bit on an artistic level. Because normally, they would say or react like, the art has to stay where the art is. This can be in the art departments, but it cannot be on the serious level of the financial department, because the financial department will tell me, like, are you this take the money and run guy now? And I will actually say I learned that in Copenhagen, because then it's always good. It feels far away. And the Austrians always believe that Denmark is far ahead in educational levels to Austria. So it's always good to bring something from Scandinavia. Thanks for that. I will actually reflect on that.
Both of your comments actually made me think about something which I think is really important in this debate, also relating to your question about what should we unfold then in the educational systems that we have. And it is this idea that I think you're totally right. We need exchange, we need examples, we need what could such a house look like in order to imagine others. But I think maybe the most important thing here is that those futures that our students are going to go into, and those teachers that are going to teach them, and those kind of things that are going to exist, it's not about being in front or behind each other. So it's not like the Danish education system is not in front of the Austrian education system. They're just different, and they should be allowed to develop in different ways. And this, I think, is important, both on an individual and institutional level, that we sure get inspired by each other and inform each other and have debates, but that each individual, each institution, each whatever can have its own distinct possible future. That it does not. We don't strive for uniformity. Not every student should have the same entrepreneurship teaching. They should have something that opens up a pathway that is individual for them. Yeah.
Really briefly to that, because I think that's a really nice way of putting it and saying it. But and what I'm thinking, just like elaborating on what you're saying, is that a lot of the structures that you work in as an artist, or the funding structures as well, they are not very future orientated at all. So that becomes kind of the wall that you hit, in a sense, because then you can say we need more room for experimentation, but maybe it's not that. Maybe it's also having institutions, or like small parts of the institutions that are actually geared to be quite, I don't know what the word in English is, able to move fast. That's not the right way to say it, but kind of agile in Danish, but I can't really say that.
Agile,
yeah. That was just because I think maybe that's where a lot of people kind of bounce back, is because, and also the educational system, and maybe there's also something good about education not always being on the future run, but can also be looking backwards. But there's something in that dynamic that would be good to maybe just have a discussion about. Maybe it's already starting. Pernille might know more about that. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have to run. Oh, I don't think. I know that we have to round up now. So if you have anything final you want to say, now is it. Otherwise, I would just say it's been super interesting, and thank you all also for your comments and your questions. And also, you are from at home now. I didn't take any questions, but we'll look into that later. Thank you so much. It's been really interesting. And this afternoon we're gonna have a masterclass on knowledge transfer. That's not exactly the headline, but it's a masterclass, and it's with you, Georg.
That's
where
the headline.
we're gonna go further into this and work with it on a workshop practical level as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. And both of you, thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure, and it's super interesting, and I just look forward to continuing this conversation like in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.